shelter-in-place warning has been lifted and the scene is secure after reports of an active shooter on campus. The fire department saying 7 people were rushed to the hospital. Latest reports are 2 of them in stable condition. No word yet on the others. All this after OSU, one of America's largest universities, sent a series of tweets telling students to shelter in place and to, quote, run, hide, fight. Correspondent Rob Schmidt joins us live from the newsroom. We're getting word that the situation is secure there, but still we are waiting to hear anything about this shooter and his motive.
Well, yeah, and Sandra, it's you know, just so many conflicting reports at this point. We're not sure if we're dealing with one suspect here or more than one. We're not sure if the suspect or suspects are dead at this point. We have just heard an array of conflicting reports on this. We can tell you the most important thing, as you said, is that the scene is now over, that it's secure. I shouldn't say over, but it is secure. The shelter in place has been ended. You can now leave where you are if you've been hiding from this, and they're saying that the scene is secure and that everything is safe now. That's the most important thing, especially for parents who are watching this on television wondering if their kids are okay. We can tell you that if you're talking to them right now, according to police, everything is now safe. But what a scene it's been here, starting about 10 o'clock this morning, about 9:56 on this massive campus there on the north side of Columbus, Ohio. 60,000 students go to this school. It is a huge Big Ten school. And we have had reports of a suspect opening fire. We've had reports of a suspect driving a car, or 2 suspects in a car, I should say, driving a vehicle into a crowd of people outside of a hall. We have read things like a fire alarm was pulled. Of course, all of this unconfirmed. We've had reports of a knife being used in this attack as well. Right now, we can tell you that your number of 7 people taken to the hospital may or may not be correct. It may be 8 at this point. We're not sure, but it is somewhere in that area there. We've heard reports of 1 person in critical condition, a vehicle running down people, as I said. This all happening at Watts Hall, which is a materials, science, and engineering building. And the shelter in place has now been lifted. Classes have been canceled for the rest of the day. But it sounds like it was just mayhem at this Watts Hall on the north side of the campus later this morning, I should say, when this all rang out. Some students reported hearing something like a bomb going off. So again, just an array of reports coming in at this time. And I think that what's going to happen is, as police start to speak a little bit more to the media now that the scene has been secured, we will get definitive answers on exactly what happened here. If there was a vehicle involved, if we have 2 suspects or 1. We have seen reports saying that the suspects have been arrested. We have reported that a suspect has been killed, and that has come out from a number of different news agencies from that area. And, of course, all of this still unconfirmed at this time, but we do know something big has happened here, and that a number of students have been injured and taken to a couple of local hospitals there at Ohio State there in central Ohio. As you see the split screen there, the campus should hopefully start to calm down a little bit. Class is canceled. Well, ladies, we'll send it back to you.
Rob, yeah. Also, the emergency management system from OSU still tweeting out instructions to students, the areas that are closed around campus, the buildings that are closed. Additional information is still yet to be offered. What are you hearing about the ability for students to reach out to their parents, reach out to anybody trying to get in touch with them? Where are we at as far as coordinated efforts with the police, with the students, and their ability to let everybody know that they're safe on campus as this situation is clearly ongoing?
Yeah, well, certainly. You're wondering if that Facebook, that safety alert that Facebook has been set up, and we're not certain of that right now. I can tell you the cell phone is probably the best bet. They did say don't call the police department trying to find out if your kids are safe or if someone you know is safe, because that ties up the phone lines. They say they needed that at the time to manage the situation here, and only call police if you had any information that could help them figure out what's going on this campus. So this has been a very disorienting thing for this campus. This is a massive campus, too. Okay. So you have a lot of people all in one place, and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to secure it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Rob, thank you very much. I want to get to some new information now. We want to go to Rod Wheeler, former D.C. homicide detective, who's very familiar with this investigation. As it continues, we are now learning 10 people have been transported to the local hospital there. 1 of those people are listed in critical condition. Rod Wheeler, how would you describe the situation right now?
Well, right now, I would clearly describe the situation as being contained. And the police department has actually tweeted out that the situation is under control. What does that mean? That just simply means that they do believe that if there was more than one suspect, they no longer believe that it's just the one individual. Some reports are saying that the one individual has been killed by police. Again, a lot of this is unconfirmed. But what I can tell you and the viewers is that right now it appears as though the area around Watts Hall, an area that I'm very familiar with, it's 19th and College Avenue, just so that the viewers know. It's on the north side of campus. It's a wide open area. It's very easy, though, for people to drive onto the university campus from on the street, just so that you know that. So it isn't one of these areas where it's really contained. It's an area where anybody can drive onto the street. But it appears as though the massive police response of the Columbus Police Department, the OSU Police Department, and the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, they did a tremendous job at getting in there. They had practice for this type of situation, and they appears to have taken it under control.
Do we know anything about the shooter or shooters or the suspects involved in this? We really don't have much to report on that front. Is that unusual at this point in an investigation?
Right, that's an excellent question, Sandra, and no, it's not unusual. Here's the thing, in these active shooter situations, you get so much information coming in from various sources. And so you get, some people say it was one shooter, two shooters, some people say it was a knife, some say it was a gun. So right now, in a situation like this, the best thing to do is wait until the investigators get in there. Now, the investigators right now, they're interviewing the victims of this situation, they're interviewing other students, they're trying to determine whether or not the shooter was a student at the university or maybe just somebody that wandered onto the campus. All of these are unanswered questions, Sandra, but we'll have the answers probably before the end of today.
All right, so what does that investigation look like? I mean, we're looking at images of this campus, and you can imagine these are students who just returned from their Thanksgiving holiday weekends with their families. They get back to campus. This happens. I can imagine it's a chaotic scene. What does the investigation look like on campus at this point? Are they going to have to shut things down completely for some time?
Right. Well, the entire campus, all of the classes have been canceled for today. Now, I have relatives, nieces and nephews that attend Ohio State currently. I'm an actual alumni of Ohio State. I've had classes before when I went to Ohio State in Watts Hall. Just so to give you a little perspective of the area, there's a lot of students around in that area because you have so many classroom buildings in that area. So it's not unusual to have a large number of people in that area. What I'm a little surprised by, though, is that if a gun was used in this situation, and it sounds like it was, more people wasn't hurt. But I guess the good news in all of that is the response by the police department. So again, the investigators, their first responsibility is to try to determine who was the shooter, where did he get the weapons, what was his motivation, and whether or not there may be any other victims out there, maybe at another crime scene or something like that. So that's the typical way that we investigate these cases, Sandra.
Okay. Also coming into our newsroom, in addition to we're learning from the fire department that 10 people have been sent to the hospital and that one is listed in critical condition. This just coming in, according to the Columbus Fire Department, a suspect is deceased and body is still at the scene. Again, that's just coming in. Rod, your thoughts with that coming in?
Right. Well, it sounds like that the individuals that were taken to the hospital were probably taken to the Ohio State University Hospital. Now, why is that important? The hospital, Sandra, is only about 3 to 4 blocks away from Watts Hall. That's very critical, and not only that, but the OSU hospital is a level 1 trauma center, which means that they have everybody on duty ready for these types of situations. As a matter of fact, just this past Saturday, they were already staged and prepared for mass casualties because of the major football game that we just had there. So that's good news in all of this. The fact that the suspect is at the scene sounds to me like the police took him out right away, and they got rid of that threat, and everyone at that point became safe.
And Rod, this is something that universities across this country are having to prepare for and do prepare for actively. From what you have seen today, how have the efforts of the university working with local police, how has that played out?
You know, I think from my perspective, and I actually teach a course in active shooters for colleges and for students, I'll tell you from what I saw, and I've been following this all day, the police there did a tremendous job. Their response was excellent. But I'll tell you one other thing real quickly, Sandra, not enough college campuses prepare for situations like this. They need to work with their local police. They need to work with security representatives, and they need to prepare for situations like this, because what it will do, it will save lives at the end of the day. And I think that's what we saw here today at Ohio State, my alma mater. They saved a lot of lives.
Hey, Rod, and just I want everybody to know, I'm going to report once again that the Columbus Fire Department is reporting that a suspect is in custody. The suspect is deceased, and the body is still at the scene. Kennedy wants to jump in with a question.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we obviously learn a lot from these unfortunate mass casualties. Do you learn as much from something like this, where the police response and the response from the school has been successful, as you do from incidents like at Virginia Tech?
Unfortunately, we learn from the worst situations, obviously, Virginia Tech, the Washington Navy Yard. And you know what we try to do, Kennedy? We try to learn from these situations and improve upon them in case this situation happens again. So looking at this situation today, to be specific, we learned a lot about our response as a police department, working with the students, working with the faculty, so that if this situation were to happen again, and hopefully it won't, but we know it probably will, our response will be better, lives will be saved.
Rod, hey, it's Pete Hegseth. Got a quick question for you. I've heard some reports of a friend of mine in Columbus who had heard secondhand, but from a trusted source, that it was a vehicle running people over, and that there was potentially a knife and a weapon as well. What if that were to be the case? And again, that's speculation, unconfirmed reports. Is the type of attack to tell us about motive or who it might be? Is there anything we can glean from what we know right now about motive or approach on this attack?
Well, that's an excellent question, Pete. And I can tell you that at this point, we really don't want to speculate too much, because we need to wait and see exactly what happened. Some people said there were gunshot victims. The one thing I can tell you real quickly, though, Pete, is that on the north side of Ohio State's campus, there's a lot of ways onto the campus grounds. So anybody from the street or from the city can actually come onto the campus. A lot of dormitories are right there on the campus in that area. So I think at this point it's better to wait until we get all of the facts to learn exactly what happened. I don't want to speculate too much on that aspect, Pete.
And Rod, I don't want to look too much into the wording of this, but perhaps it could reveal something, maybe not. The wording from the fire department is a suspect is deceased and body is still at the scene. At this point, we can't rule out that there's more than one suspect.
Well, you're exactly right. And, that's exactly what we as investigators look at. We do have one suspect there. But here's the thing, real quickly. I know we don't have a lot of time. The other victims that's been transported to the hospital, was one or more of them involved in this? We don't know that yet. Is there another crime scene somewhere? We don't know that yet. But if a vehicle was used, like it's been reported, it could indicate that maybe this was somewhat of a personal attack that someone had. We don't know if this was a student. We don't know if it was just somebody in the community. Again, at this stage, I think since the suspect is down, we don't need to speculate. Let's just wait and see exactly who this person was and why they carried out what they decided to carry out.
All right. Well, after reports of an active shooter at The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, we have learned, Rod Wheeler, thank you for your time and jumping in on this breaking news, that the suspect is dead. A suspect is dead and is still at the scene. 10 have been transported to the area hospital. One victim is listed in critical condition. We have just learned 9 others are in stable condition. And all this after a shelter-in-place warning has now been lifted at the university. That all happening at Ohio State University today, one of the largest universities in this country. Well, after a dramatic scene played out at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio this morning, reports of an active shooter on campus. Students were told to, quote, run, hide, fight. In the presence of this shooter, we have now learned a suspect is dead, still at the scene, and 10 have been transported to the local hospital there, one listed in critical condition. 9 others are in stable condition. A suspect is in custody now at Ohio State University, as the scene is now being described by authorities as secure. Another Fox News alert for you. President-elect Donald Trump's incoming White House team. He's meeting with several people today, including former CIA Director David Petraeus. He's reportedly a contender for the Secretary of State position, as are Mitt Romney and Rudy Giuliani, who have sparked an internal battle over who should get the top diplomatic post. Mr. Trump is meeting with Romney tomorrow for a second time, but his senior advisor says many of Trump's supporters would feel betrayed if he picked the former Massachusetts governor. But incoming Chief of Staff Reince Priebus is pushing back on the idea that there's an internal tug of war going on.
He's going to be making the best decision for the American people. It isn't a matter of warfare. I mean, there's a lot of opinions about this, and yes, it is a sort of a team of rivals concept if you were to go toward the Governor Romney concept, but I think that should tell all Americans about where President-elect's head's at, which is a place that will put the best possible people together for all Americans, no matter who you are, what religion, whatever your opinion is.
All right, well, you heard from Pete Hegseth and Kennedy earlier. Meghan McCain and Dagan McDowell are on the couches with us this morning as well. This afternoon now, right, Pete?
That's right.
Pete,
morning in the West.
Yeah, morning in the West. Enjoy your cup of coffee. Pete, but when you look at what's going on with this transition team, there are some people saying it looks divided. When you've got Kellyanne Conway, one of his top advisors, his campaign manager, urging him not to go with Mitt Romney when clearly he's still considering him for the Secretary of State.
But I think the president-elect is clearly secure in his own skin enough to say this is a deliberation. I'm taking counsel from people across the spectrum. I'm willing to listen to people who clearly didn't support me at all. And ultimately, I think what Reince Priebus said, Chairman Priebus said, is right. He wants the best person in the position. He wants to govern successfully. He ran on a bold, ambitious agenda, including on America's role in the world. And he probably was more surprised by Mitt Romney than he thought, and ultimately wants the best person, whether it's him, Rudy Giuliani, or someone like David Petraeus. He's got a menu of fantastic options.
And for a while there, Meghan, it was Mitt Romney, Rudy Giuliani. We just saw those two picks that he was considering, but it sort of made room for a third option, and a lot of other people and names are out there.
Yeah, and I love David Petraeus. I love the idea that he could possibly be Secretary of State. I watched Kellyanne Conway over the weekend, and maybe it's just because I've lived through Game Change. I have a really low tolerance for staffers going rogue against their candidates. Donald Trump became president on Donald Trump's own accord, and I think he himself would probably take offense at the idea that anyone else should be given credit. Clearly, Donald Trump thinks it's okay to be meeting with Mitt Romney and to be giving the olive branch out to people like me, quite frankly, who maybe weren't the biggest Trump supporters. And I like the idea that he is trying to reach out in different ways. This is a very bad look for Kellyanne Conway. She's also up for a job, by the way.
I don't think for a second that she is speaking out without his okay.
Yeah,
I don't think
this is deliberate.
Second that she is out on national TV saying these things if he wasn't aware of it in the first place.
Then she should make that very clear.
What's the strategy
This is something that Donald should, because again,
I'll tell you exactly what the strategy is. I actually asked Anthony Scaramucci about it this morning. Can I just get that in there really quickly? Because he's on the transition team. He's an executive committee member on the transition team. And I just said, is there tension between Donald Trump and Kellyanne Conway? Absolutely not. Is he comfortable with what she's saying publicly? I think so.
Okay, here's what he's doing. Donald Trump is reaching out. He's being presidential. He's bringing the party together. And even if it's just perceptually, even if just the look of Mitt Romney going to Trump Tower or Mar-a-Lago and meeting with him.
You don't think he's really being considered by Donald Trump?
I don't think Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney are being considered at this point. I think if either one of them were the strongest candidate, they would have already emerged. And I think there's a reason that the two of them are being kind of pitted against each other. And Kellyanne Conway knows exactly what she's doing. She's giving red meat to the Trump loyalists that allows Donald Trump to look presidential.
But this party ain't just about Trump loyalists anymore, Kennedy. It's about the whole party.
But it's not going to be Romney or Giuliani. It's going to be, and I don't even think it's going to be Ambassador Bolton.
There are conflicting reports on this, by the way.
And keep an eye on Bob Corker as well.
There's also a report out today saying that Trump is angry at her. So again, Anthony Scaramucci is working for the administration, or at least was working on the Trump campaign.
I just wanted to point that out because I asked him and he went on the record about it.
Whatever it is, if it is this sort of game that they're playing, I think it's incredibly ill-advised because, again, the thing that I have liked so much about Donald Trump and been going on TV since he's elected is that he is reaching out to other voters. And if it looks like they're just going to keep grudges and they're going to have a problem with different kind of Republicans, it's a really bad foot to start your first day in office.
It's better for her to do it than him.
One thing I wanted to point out, if General David Petraeus is in serious running for Secretary of State, you're going to get into some at least optics issues if you have General Mattis as Secretary of Defense, which might happen, and then Lieutenant General Flynn, and then General David Petraeus. It looks heavy on the military might.
I don't think he'll care about that optic because he wants leaders and folks that have won. And David Petraeus won the Iraq War. He has he also has a great diplomatic side. General Mattis is known as a war fighter. General Flynn would be fantastic, is going to be fantastic at the National Security Council. So what's wrong with that? I think that's an easy thing to do.
By the way, those being considered for jobs, you are one of them, it's fair to say. You've been called in to meet with Donald Trump tomorrow.
What are you meeting about?
Indeed. No, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm honored to have a moment to meet with the president-elect. And I've served this country like so many other people we're talking about, have a heart for it. So if that were to be in the cards, great. But
I'm all for it.
Forward to it.
Good. A bunch of generals, but here we're
I'm definitely not a general.
But well, to us you are.
No,
you always will be.
A high-ranking military officer.
You've heard so much about business leaders, and that's why the Romney thing has made sense on that level. Because if they can put their personal animosity aside, and I think they're both smart enough to do that, their business backgrounds and their ability to turn things around and look at projects and difficulties in a way that is completely outside the box, I think that is mutually beneficial.
There's about $6 billion that's missing within the State Department that basically this is a morass. Donald Trump talks about the swamp. There's no deeper, murkier, stinkier swamp than the
$6 billion
State Department. So that's one of the reasons that Romney would be at least considered for the job.
Megan's always had a way with words, hasn't she?
Stinky. It is.
Sorry, nasty.
Good luck.
Sometimes that's the most effective word. So,
at least I didn't hold my nose when I said it.
All right, we want to let you know that we are awaiting a news conference to happen at Ohio State University. It could be happening anytime this hour. We will take you to that live when it happens. Hopefully get an update on the victims at Ohio State University, as well as any update that we might get on the suspect. One is dead, the fire department has confirmed. We don't know if there are any others, so we will go to that news conference when it happens. Meanwhile, President-elect Trump slamming Hillary Clinton for officially joining the recount effort in 3 states, pointing out that during her concession speech, she told supporters it was time to accept that he would be our next president. Is she being a sore loser?
President-elect Donald Trump and his team slamming Hillary. This as election officials in Wisconsin meet today to discuss a potential timeline. Senior Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway not holding back. She's calling Hillary's camp a pack of sore losers and more. And in a series of tweets, President-elect Trump throwing Hillary's own words right back at her, saying in one tweet, Hillary Clinton conceded the election when she called me just prior to the victory speech, and after the results were in. Nothing will change. And if you recall, Hillary sang a much different tune in the debates and on the campaign trail after Mr. Trump said he might not accept the election results. Watch.
He refused to say that he would respect the results of this election. By doing that, he is threatening our democracy.
All right, Pete, I was literally laughing in my parents' kitchen all weekend about Jill Stein getting so much money. Yeah. I was like, what sucker is giving this woman money to do a recount? Listen, are liberals only okay with elections being rigged as long as they are losing?
Of course. I mean, this is an extension of, remember the protests that broke out right after the election, and you asked the protesters what their end state is, and they're like, well, no Trump, and they're like, well, Trump won. Same thing here. Jill Stein got 1% of the vote nationally in 4th place in Wisconsin, where she's challenging it. And even Hillary Clinton's campaign has acknowledged that no one's ever overcome the types of margins that exists in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and what's the other state? I don't know that they're
Michigan,
that they're challenging right now. They also said there's no evidence in fraud of those states. So this is an absolute nothing burger. Jill Stein's raising money for Jill Stein and the Green Party and self-promotion. This will go nowhere, and I think it is an extension of them just being sore losers. They refuse to want to accept that Donald Trump is going to be president.
Bless your bones, but it is so much bigger than that. This is not just Jill Stein. Jill Stein is being used as a pawn here because she's the only one who could launch this sort of recount effort and keep Hillary Clinton's hands clean.
And by the way, who's on your show tonight?
Who was not able to raise more than $3.5 million over an entire year in a presidential cycle when she had the highest profile campaign of any Green Party candidate since Ralph Nader. All of a sudden, she can raise $5 million in less than a week.
Stop upsetting her like that. She's losing her voice.
First of all, I agree. Second of all, no, I agree with you.
You're giving me the vape.
She's also
This is not just about Jill Stein. She's being used by Democrats who don't want to get their hands dirty. They want to make sure that Hillary Clinton is shielded, and they're conveniently saying, well, we weren't going to ask for a recount, but now that you're talking about one, I guess we'll get in on the action. It's a little too pat, and it smells fishier than a carp and a car trunk in August.
Oh my gosh.
I can't disagree with that.
But and we should point out, it's not only that the Clinton campaign has said that they don't find any actionable evidence of vote hacking, but the Obama administration said that more than once over the weekend.
Sure.
They said the elections were free and fair from a cybersecurity perspective, free of interference regarding malicious cyber activity. So that whole Russian hacking ruse that they rolled out during the DNC isn't playing out, but you still have them challenging this.
And who owns 16 million voting machines?
They're trying to discredit the administration. They're trying to discredit the administration. And this is not these machines. It's local. It's the Democrats that want to make this a federal voting system. These are local.
Which would be vulnerable then.
Yeah, exactly. When all of them are connected to the internet, which they're not. And if you read the Wall Street Journal, you would know that.
It is not just about Jill Stein, but I will say that she also represents the last vestige of teeny tiny hope that every progressive in this country has that they can somehow do something about it.
And the hope of the entire Democratic Party and the entire Democratic machine that raised $1 billion for a losing candidate who is now in the woods in Rhode Island taking selfies with drifters.
Never underestimate, though, the level of liberal left-wing idiocy out there in terms of anybody who would throw a dime at Jill Stein or any of this.
If they were going to throw those kind of dimes at Jill Stein, they would have done it during the presidential race.
Yeah. Could I turn this back to you, Megan, though? What do you make of Donald Trump's response to this? And should he have even responded or gotten involved?
I don't like any of this. I think
weekend?
it's absurd and ridiculous that there's any kind of recount being called by Jill Stein or Hillary Clinton or whomever secretly is calling for this. I think it's a pipe dream and a bad fantasy, and people are deluding themselves if they think President Trump isn't about to be inaugurated in January. He is. I think President Trump should focus on putting his cabinet together and talking about making America great. Again, he's really won me over a lot in the past few weeks since he's been elected, and I would like to continue on that path. I think he should choose a Secretary of State somewhat soon. I'm getting to the point where I'm sick of the back and forth. I don't like the infighting. Like I said earlier, I have respect for David Petraeus and Mitt Romney and Mayor Giuliani, and I just would like,
any one of those three would be solid?
I just think the pageantry of going in and out. Obviously, I would prefer Mitt Romney or David Petraeus over Giuliani, just simply.
It's made something boring fascinating, though, to watch.
But it should. But I think actually at this point, for those of us who don't want this to be a reality show, it's good for it to go on. And he's presidential now. He should put his cabinet together.
Back to the reality, we actually talked about some of this before the Clinton campaign signed on these recounts on Friday. Yeah. And both political statisticians, Nate Silver and Nate Cohn, have tweeted about this or written about the allegations of vote hacking and rigging in, say, Wisconsin, for example. And two states that use paper ballots, Iowa and Minnesota, this is from Nate Cohn at the New York Times, the results look exactly the same as they do in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
they can be explained by
it was the computer scientists who tried to point out that there was a disparity in voting in counties that had electronic voting versus paper voting, but then these two men whose lives it is to wrangle all the numbers and polling data, they say no, that's actually right in line with a weird election and the strange blanket of constituents that both candidates knit together. Unfortunately for Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump's electoral quilt was just a bit larger.
I just think about the millions given to Jill Stein.
Idiots. There's a sucker born every day. It's crazy.
Think about the people you could have actually helped with that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think the people who are funding her are big money Democrats, cronyist friends of Hillary Clinton.
We got to move on. Liberals, President Trump won, fair and square. President Obama is under fire for his response to the death of Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, as President-elect Trump hints that parts of the Cuba deal could be undone.
We are awaiting a news conference on the campus of The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. After this morning, the public safety incident, it was reported there was an active shooter on campus, but the university has now put out a statement not only saying and confirming what we reported earlier, that a suspect has been shot and reported deceased and that 10 had been moved to the local hospital, one in critical condition, but the victim injuries include stab wounds, injury by motor vehicle, and other injuries that are still still being evaluated. At the recommendation of law enforcement, campus alerts, shelters have been alerts for shelter in place have been lifted. They're calling the campus secure at this point, but we are still learning more, and we hope to learn more when they hold a news conference coming up. We are told that the campus president will be available for that news conference, as well as possibly medical staff, so we could learn more about what happened on that campus, one of the largest colleges in this country, this morning.
All right, President Obama under fire from leading Republicans for his response to the death of Cuban dictator Fidel Castro. The president, who's worked to normalize diplomatic relations with Cuba, staying away from passing judgment on Castro's legacy. His statement reading in part, for nearly 6 decades, the relationship between the United States and Cuba was marked by discord and profound political disagreements. During my presidency, we have worked hard to put the past behind us. Today, we offer condolences to Fidel Castro's family, and our thoughts and prayers are with the Cuban people. Florida Senator Marco Rubio, the son of Cuban immigrants, took the president to task for failing to acknowledge the victims of Castro's regime. Castro's death also sparking talk about President-elect Trump's Cuba policy. He's already threatened to reverse normalization efforts, and this morning he tweeted, "If Cuba is unwilling to make a better deal for the Cuban people, the Cuban-American people, and the U.S. as a whole, I will terminate the deal." Obviously, this is an emotional issue, especially for Cuban Americans living in places like Miami. They were told in Cuba to keep their doors closed and not play any music in the wake of this news. But in Miami, they were celebrating all night long. Should President-elect Trump completely tear up this deal?
He certainly can, because it was an executive order like so many other things that Barack Obama has done. And anyone who's looked at our Cuba policy for any amount of time understands that at a crucible moment when you're cutting a deal, you got to get concessions from the Castro regime, otherwise you're giving away the farm, and that's exactly what Barack Obama did. So you see in Donald Trump's reaction a distinct difference from exactly how Obama held it. I mean, it's outrageous, the statement Obama put out. It was value neutral. He didn't point out the fact of this dictatorship and what it's done to free expression and free speech and free peoples for 60 years. So Donald Trump made it clear, I'm going to stand up for America first, and I'm going to be strong, and I'm going to stand up to strong men, especially 90 miles from our coast. So I think Cuba is an opportunity for the president-elect to show what a different course he will take that isn't about apologizing and groveling and isn't value neutral and is proud of who we are and what we represent.
And we should always be defending freedom and spreading freedom across the globe, including to places like Cuba. But was this a bad deal? Is there a way of opening up Cuba economically and allowing the people there to thrive without continuing to prop up this 6 decades old dictatorship?
Because Americans can now travel and make some limited investments in Cuba based on this deal, but hard currency wages to the Cuban people are still confiscated by the government.
That's right.
Converted into worthless pesos. So there's a lot more that could be done. The Wall Street Journal editorial page referred to President Obama's statement as morally antiseptic, which I think speaks to that. But if you look at what the Canadian leader Justin Trudeau said in that initial statement, which was repugnant, I mean, I don't even want to read from it. So he's talking about the deep sorrow after learning the death of Fidel Castro. And there, broadly speaking, there was this liberal progressive amnesia about the horrific, devastating, murderous legacy of this man. I just could encourage people to read what Gary Kasparov had to say about this man did not champion freedom, he destroyed it.
Well, yeah, especially if you were a dissident or gay or in any way spoke out against the regime.
Dungeons. That's all you need to know. Dungeons
or the Cuban Coast Guard letting an entire ship sink instead of helping people who were trying to flee the country. Your thoughts, Megan?
Over the weekend, maybe I just am surrounded by too many conservatives, but I was shocked that anyone would defend Castro at all. And Prime Minister Man Bun from Canada, his statement, he should resign over that. I mean, talk to anyone who has fled Cuba and the human rights violations and the atrocities and the cruelty that happened.
Why do you think they were celebrating?
Legendary revolution.
But it's beyond my comprehension that you can sort of gloss over that from our own president as well. I don't know if we're just so like deadened to all of this, or maybe we're just so removed from history, but Prime Minister Trudeau came out and basically championed Castro.
Here's what he's walked those back.
But whatever. I mean, it's beyond. I mean, talk to anyone. Marco Rubio was the only one that got it right. He was talking about the evil, murderous dictator and an impoverished island prison. As you said, his family fled Cuba. But it's really, when people say they don't trust the media, I think it's because there's a spin on this that somehow a guy like Castro could be a good person.
Castro's supporters and detractors recognized his tremendous dedication and love for the Cuban people, who had a deep and lasting affection for El Comandante. That's what Justin Trudeau said initially.
Yeah, that's a forced affection. If it's anything, it's Stockholm Syndrome.
Anything Canadians have to say about America and our election, you washed any right to criticize America at all with what your Prime Minister said about Castro.
I talked about
period.
Yeah, so go take a shot at maple syrup, eh? New concerns about how out of touch the Democratic Party may be from the rest of the country. And Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan